Hello and welcome to Star USA Training. Today is Tuesday, October 14th, 2025, and this is our first in a three-part series covering the 2025 year-end insights as we prepare for 2026. We'll have follow-up webinars in both November and December, so be sure to join those as we go. Today we are joined by two speakers, Lee Mersek of Global Resilience Advisory and Chris Lundy of Röhlig Logistics, and they'll jump in here about partway through the webinar. And we'll get to hear a little bit about 2025 from their perspectives in their respective fields. If you are attending live, we encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from today. We also invite you to connect with Star USA on LinkedIn. We're focused on growing our presence there this year by sharing content, including industry insights, updates, articles, and training opportunities. And we'd love to connect with you if you feel open to that. So feel free to drop your LinkedIn profile in the chat as if you like to share with other people in today's session. This session is being recorded. After the webinar, we will upload the recording, the slides, and any additional materials to our website. If you registered for this webinar, you will receive an email with the link once those resources become available, usually later on in the week. We'll get that sent out. For those looking for continuing education credits, we'll provide a CE code at the end of the webinar. This session qualifies for one CE credit for licensed customs brokers and those with CCS credentials through NCBFAA. Please be sure to save the code given at the end of the webinar. I'll have the slide up for several minutes. If you're watching this back on YouTube later, it will be a different code. They use different codes for recorded versus live sessions. And as always, we encourage you to stay engaged throughout today's session. We'll have myself and two other speakers, so feel free to post your questions into the question and answer portion of the webinar software there. Questions posted in the chat may not get answered, so please put them in the Q&A. And lastly, as a quick disclaimer, while I am a licensed customs broker, today's discussion is informational only and should not be considered legal advice nor the transaction of customs business on your behalf. If you or your company need additional assistance after the webinar, please do not hesitate to reach out. And with that, we will get started. And again, please feel free to submit questions as we go for myself or for the other panelists as we get through their sections. So trade and compliance hit different in 2025. This has been a year of extreme volatility, turbulence. Not since the Tariff Act of 1930 have we seen this much volatility in the industry. Those of you that have been with us through the MOD Act and the NAFTA rollout in '94, if you remember the days of the ISF implementations, the ACE transitions, the Export Control Reform Acts, or even the Section 301 and 232s from 2018, this surpasses all of those and maybe all of them combined, in my opinion and my experience. This has been a significant year. I was at a conference last week in DC with people that are also in the industry, lawyers and various people from the Hill, talking about the events. And it was both validating and a little bit disheartening to hear that kind of nobody has all the answers. The answers don't actually exist for the challenges that we've been facing. So two things have stood out to me throughout the course of the year that I will maintain as an undercurrent kind of through the next several months and the webinars to come through those. Those two things that stand out to me are having access to collaborative resources. It's been very, very important for me personally in 2025. I imagine the same for our guest speakers today, as well as for those of you in the audience. And the second most important thing is having reliable communication channels. And I'll talk more about those here briefly. So when I say collaborative resources, what do I mean? First and foremost, trustworthy information and information sources. ChatGPT and AI, I do not consider to be reliable, trustworthy information sources. Most news media outlets. I have gotten very good insights from various industry resources, places like NCBFAA or ICPA or some of those other networks that are out there. Those have provided the most consistent access to reliable information, but there is no one source has it all, at least that I found. Some will do a very good job of covering tariffs, and I have those bookmarked If you do need those, or if you have some of those resources, feel free to post them in the chat and share them with one another, things that you use on a regular basis throughout the year. But making sure that you have confidence in those sources. The CSMS messages have been probably the most definitive source, but there are a number of players in the space that will provide useful insights. So making sure that you've got those proper bookmarks saved. Having accessible networks of individuals, of people that you have confidence in, that you can collaborate with, or even just commiserate with. Those have been transformative for me this year in terms of maintaining sanity and trying to provide useful support to my network of clients and to my peers in the industry that I work with, being able to work together to collaboratively solve challenges. And resilient teams. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I don't think so. Teams have been tested this year. People that work in this space have been put under the highest degree of scrutiny from senior management, from external partners, from internal partners in teams, from direct reports. The amount of pressure that has come from all sides feels like a lot. I once had a friend of mine tell me that pressure is made up. It's not real. You choose what you feel, and I've tried to practice that this year, and just being cognizant of the fact that everybody feels lost and frustrated. So making sure that you're giving grace to your teams, whether they're internal, whether they're your supply chain partners, whether they're your networks, paying attention to that, I think has been very, very helpful for me this year. And then lastly, quick thinking and reactivity. I know I like to preach things like proactivity. I find that to be a very useful mentality to have in most years, but the concept of being proactive this year feels laughable to me. So that's not to say that you can't be prepared to move when something comes across your desk that you need to react to, but trying to get ahead of the curve has proven very, very challenging for myself and many others in this field. So just a couple of key things to consider. Nobody should be tackling these things alone, making sure that you've got access to people and individuals and teams and resources and supply chain partners that you can work with. If you don't have those readily available, or if they're not meeting enough of the needs that you have, this is a great time to be building up your network, especially as we prepare for 2026 and the challenges to come there. And preparations has its pros and cons right now. I have heard from a lot of, I would say, non-industry insiders that all you need to do is X, or all you have to talk about is Y, or all you have to say is Z. Those things don't exist, at least in my world. And anybody that says that they've got a magic fix, I'm very, very dubious of. From what I've seen, it's elbow grease is the most effective tool. So it is smart to prepare for different eventualities, and as I said before, be ready to react. So just being cognizant of those things. This is my encouragement portion. I apologize for not being very encouraging. And then the communication channels, I wanted to stress this. Nobody's got the full story. In my conversations with importers, with exporters, with buyers and sellers, with brokers, with forwarders, with all of the supply chain partners that exist, nobody has the full story. It takes coordination and communication throughout all of those different channels to get a viable plan in place and make something happen, make something different happen. A lot of people have had to pivot this year to a new effort or a new initiative or a new direction, and it takes a lot of individuals working together towards a shared understanding and a shared outcome, and communication is your best way to get there. Emails are good for communicating standard info, but there has been a glut of non-standard info throughout the course of this year. And everybody kind of, or at least, I don't want to speak for everybody, I've noticed a tendency for people to revert into something that's more comfortable and less committal, like an email. But I find that it disrupts communication substantially enough that you need to be having verbal conversations a lot more than we've become used to since post-COVID. We're in a different world now, and we're able to communicate with tools like Teams and Zoom and other online tools, and taking advantage of those is very, very important. So um, I think it's very, very smart to have a strong network, work together, and communicate with one another. So before we get into our guests, I do have a quick poll that I want to send out to the group. And I have a button for that somewhere. Here it is. Launch. There we go. So the poll is, tell us what your network looks like right now. This is a multiple choice. You can choose multiple answers here if they apply to you. And I'm very curious to see what people in the field right now are using as their network. Also, a colleague of mine shared this pie chart with me the other day, and I got a chuckle out of it. I don't know whose it is. I stole it, but it gave me a chuckle. So if your network is your teams at work are a major part of your network and they're effective, that's a good thing to highlight and help people kind of recognize where if they don't have a strong team at work, where they might be able to try and put some effort into building up a team. Industry groups and affiliations, if they've been helpful to you over the past year, they have been very helpful to me. Do you make use of learning opportunities like webinars, conferences, and similar events? I have found conferences and even webinars to be hit and miss. It's difficult to find good actionable info, which is not the conference's fault. It's not the speaker's fault, but it's very, very, very difficult to get anything effective out of those. Family and friends. If you've been relying on them, trying to explain to them what you've been dealing with this year, and if that's been useful for you. We'll give it a few more seconds here. If it's just you out there by yourself, it might be important to just kind of say that right now and acknowledge that you've been on an island and recognize that maybe this is an opportunity to find some folks out there that might be in a similar boat. LinkedIn is another good one in the chat I see here. If LinkedIn has been useful for you, I did not include that in the chat because I am terrible at LinkedIn. So yeah, feel free to share your preferred networks in the chat if you've been using some. We got most people responding here, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results so you can all see them. It looks like a majority of you are making a lot of use of webinars, conferences, and similar events like that of kind of industry-based learning. I could put LinkedIn in that category as well. So that's very good to see. There are opportunities still coming down the pipe. I know that the government is currently not hosting any active opportunities, but hopefully soon that will start to change. And a lot of you are also working with your teams at work. That's fantastic. I've noticed a lot of hit and miss across the board with various workplaces. Sometimes their internal teams are not constructive, but by and large, the majority of people are in it together with their colleagues. So good to see that represented here. And then poor family and friends. So yeah, if you do have a network that you or a resource that you use, feel free to post it in the chat and share it with other people. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, we are going to transition into our guest speakers with the first up, we have Lee Mersek, the president and founder of Global Resilience Advisory. Lee is a Marine Corps officer and career intelligence professional with over 20 years of combined public and private sector experience. He specializes in crisis response, continuity of operations, strategic planning, and risk management, and has on-the-ground experience in over 60 countries. Lee is the president and founder of Global Resilience Advisory, a boutique consultancy adapting intelligence community best practices for private sector clients. And Lee is here to talk to us about geopolitical developments and their impacts on business operations. Take it away, Lee.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, Mike, thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you to everybody else for this opportunity to speak with you this morning. Um, as Mike mentioned, I've got a risk management consultancy, and like many others, I handle duty of care matters. But part of where I'm differentiating myself is also with a more deliberate adherence to intelligence practices that can be used to inform business operations, business continuity matters. We'll go over some of that framework on the next slide, but My intent for this presentation is to have us take a broader look at major geopolitical developments within the past year that I've personally seen impact clients' business operations. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to answer, what do you need to know now as you make decisions regarding any business operations that extend outside of the US? Or really, maybe the other major takeaway is what is your plan for monitoring geopolitical developments to know what decisions you need to make and when you need to make them? So to start with, we'll give a quick overview of the basic framework that I like to work with. So two terms, geopolitics. I put the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition up there, which is good. It lends itself to more of an academic definition of it. Personally, I've seen in the risk management space, geopolitics has kind of become a buzzword. I heard a very interesting conversation with a political philosopher where he likened politics with reality TV, where some people say they're into politics, but they're only looking at the wave tops. They know the major players and the things that are making big impacts in the news. Kind of the same as reality TV, where they're filming, a few people during like 3 days of their lives, but they only distill it down to about 30 minutes, and you just know the 30 minutes where there is the most drama and the most major players. Well, the same thing tends to happen in geopolitics, I guess, where folks tend to, we're focused on the news cycle and the major things that are popping up in the news. Meanwhile, there's developments happening all over the world in many other countries that may or may not be impacting your business operations. But part of the reason that's happening is that also a framework that we're using in foreign policy circles. The world's no longer operating in binary terms of war and peace. What we're in is a competition continuum, right? We may be competing with our adversaries. When I say we, the United States, right? And I believe every company here is a US-based company. But the United States, really any company, is competing with its adversaries, but they may be doing so short of the level of war. And countries may also have close allies that they're also competing with, maybe in a more friendly manner. Uh, we may be competing and cooperating at the same time. A lot of, I think it's pretty clear that the US and Russia are in a state of competition short of war. At the same time, at least last I checked, we're still cooperating closely on getting astronauts to and from Earth to space. So that's the framework that we're operating in, is that nation states and non-state entities are going to be competing at various degrees, and we're going to be wavering between levels of peace and war at all times. And now the way that the nation states and non-state entities compete is through instruments of national power. The acronym that I always reference is DIMEFIL, stands for diplomatic, information, military, economic, financial, intelligence, and law enforcement. So what that means is those are all the tools in a nation's toolbox that they have to compete with their adversaries, or even, again, like I said, with our allies and partners. That's happening continuously throughout the world. And just because a military is not actively deployed, it may be in the background as a deterrence effort. We may be actively competing through, as many of you are familiar with, tariffs on the economic front, or diplomatically by isolating countries or bringing pressure on them to change. Law enforcement, our ability to rein in criminal groups in other countries. We'll get to some of this later on too. The reason that I'm bringing up this framework of geopolitics and why this is important, right? This isn't directly impacting your companies, or it shouldn't. Most nation states and non-state entities might not be targeting your specific company, but your company will probably be the unintended collateral damage of some of this continuous competition, right? Terrorists and dictators around the world are dictators are nationalizing industries in their countries. Terrorists are attacking supply chains and vessels. All of those things may be impacting, for instance, I'll use Coca-Cola as an example. That may be impacting Coca-Cola's means of accessing suppliers and markets, even though those terrorists and dictators themselves are probably drinking Coca-Cola. Forgive me for if anybody here's for Coca-Cola, not trying to paint Coke in a bad light, but the point being is that there are unintended consequences from this continuous geopolitical competition. And so how can companies navigate this? Well, this is where intelligence comes in, and I'll fall short of going into a lengthy class on intelligence, but what I like to discuss with Intel is how it's the same across the public sector and the private sector. Overall, I like to define intelligence as tailored processes to help decision makers make informed decisions. I also emphasize that it's a process. We tend to use the term intelligence colloquially to describe a product. Even within the Intel community, there's probably, there's various debates on this, but at least the way I tend to look at it, intelligence is a process. And not only that, but it's a tailored process, and it has to be tailored to individual decision makers, right? We can build products, we can establish baselines of current conditions in the world, and then or in a specific geographic area, and then monitor for changes in those conditions. The monitoring is also a key part of the intelligence process. The Intel field, or as a discipline, uh, it cannot predict the future, but it can anticipate courses of action. I always tend to harp on that. As Mike just said, it's very difficult to be proactive in this environment, but that's where I say Intel can help you be a little bit more proactive. It may not be the cure-all, but it at least helps you close the gap between known and unknowns, and it helps anticipate potential threats to your operations. Uh, I tend to, especially again in the risk management industry, this tends to come up a lot. I think there's a conflation between intelligence and journalism and academia. So I'll touch on that briefly. All three are very relevant, right? And journalism and academia are great. I would say that um, everybody on this webinar here, if you've got the time and interest to sign up for this webinar, you've probably got the time and interest to be listening to podcasts, listening to NPR on the way into work. So you've got access to journalism, and you're probably, very much aware of at least some of the bigger stories that are happening in the world. The way I like to differentiate it is that while all three can help you make informed decisions, and academia and journalism are also very relevant sources for intelligence, I differentiate them in the fact that academia itself is it's not tailored, it's generally for a broad audience, or at least people within a given, academic field. And the purpose of academia is testing a hypothesis. It's asking questions that only the researcher asked, and its purpose is to contribute to a greater body of knowledge. It's not helping a specific decision maker make a decision. It's just helping us better understand the world. Journalism has the broadest audience, right? Its audience is everyone, or perhaps maybe specific subscribers to a journalistic source. Maybe that journalistic source has a narrow field of people that are interested in it. But the primary purpose is to alert people to things that are happening. It's reporting on what has happened. Yes, there's some analysis and some trends analysis from the past, and you probably get quotes from, expert opinions, or editorials that offer expert opinion, and maybe predictions for the future. Folks are giving their best guess, but that's at a narrow point in time when that's published that they're stating this is where I see this going, and the primary purpose again is just to report that something's happened. The Intel field, the way I differentiate it is it's got the narrowest audience, the decision maker, the person, or perhaps the collective of people, board of directors or C-suite that's making key decisions for your company, or, obviously for a nation state, or a military unit in the public sector. It is reporting current conditions as they pertain to the decision maker, but it's also monitoring for indicators that specific courses of action are going to happen. And these indicators will trigger decision points. So for every decision maker, so long as you've got a decision you need to make and you're not sure how to make it, and you're not sure when to make it, Intel can help you at least have a better understanding of those decisions and when you're going to need to make them based on the persistent monitoring of the environment and understanding when those change. So if we could move on to the next slide. Snap now, even though I've just gone through and said Intel is about processes and products that are tailored to a specific decision maker, I'm going through with an Intel mindset, but I still want to give a broad overview of geopolitical conditions that are are likely to impact this audience, right? We have a large audience today, so trying to make this as broad as possible. So, based on what I've seen thus far in 2025, I've selected three of the most significant impacts to U.S. companies and their business operations. There can be more. I just personally feel that these three were the biggest and the most reoccurring. So, first off, intentional targeting of supply chains. Again, some of this is happening militarily. You could argue some of this is happening financially or economically. Anything to impede the movement of cargo between places, or it might be an unintended, byproduct. So, for example, for anybody who's been following what's happened in Yemen and the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, we've got the Houthi separatist group in Yemen, and since Israel's war in Gaza began, the Houthis have aligned themselves with the Palestinians and were targeting at first Israeli associated vessels and then Western flagged vessels. Now, as of January, they had paused the attacks during some developments in the conflict. They agreed to a ceasefire with the U.S. last May, but they have continued. As of July, they've continued targeting vessels. Now, uh, obviously, we've launched there's a naval expeditionary force that's in the Red Sea that's helping contain some of that. We've launched strikes on the Houthis, so shipping is proceeding, but it's not proceeding as normal. Um, we've also
Yep.
got the PR. Oh, yeah, Mike.
I don't want to rush you too much, but we're getting short on
No
time.
problem. Yeah, I apologize. It's
No
stupid
problem.
time. So anyway, Houthis, People's Republic of China, targeting Taiwan, likely to quarantine it, right? It's not targeting you, but it's going to impact the flow of goods. Spillover effects from information operations. So this is happening all over the world. So Russia, probably my favorite, Russia is Russian incursions into NATO airspace. It's an information operation showing NATO is weak. The U.S. is trying to undermine Russia by, getting peace treaties, having stronger linkages to Central Asia. The spillover effects of this are twofold. One, maybe that Russian information operation is making the Baltics look like it's a less stable place to invest in, while the U.S. is also, its information operations are also resulting perhaps in new opportunities for U.S. companies in Central Asia. And then finally, competition for natural resources. We've watched Rwandan-backed M23 control parts of Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, uh, part of the world that most folks don't think about till you realize that that is where what most of the world's or the largest supply of the world's coltan is, and that's a key ingredient or a key uh, uh, part for many electronics, including cell phone parts. So if we move on to the last slide, so possibilities for 2026. The only geopolitical certainty that I feel comfortable saying is that we're going to see a continued use of all instruments of national power along the competition continuum, right? You can guarantee that while we may not be at war, you're going to see more information operations, more economic sanctions, and that's going to have those spillover effects into your business. Now, indicators for the direction that 2026 is going in, I chose three that, as of right now, seem the most interesting to me. Will the EU define homeland defense? Part of that's been in the news as a matter of burden sharing, as far as security for the European continent. Uh, but it goes beyond that. It also implies Europe being able to take a greater share of security burdens in Africa itself, and it also frees up the U.S. for operating more security to, for instance, enforce freedom of navigation at sea, which can have spillover effects in the positive for supply chains. Iran tilting east or west, as of I believe it was yesterday with the peace conference for Israel and Palestine. President Trump ended even by stating that we're ready and willing to speak to Iran. However, they're linked with, they're an adversary of the U.S. and linked with our other adversaries. The reason I'm looking at this is that depending on which direction it goes, it's an indicator of stability in the region and possible further security agreements in the Middle East. Those security agreements are increasingly tied with trade deals, which brings me to the third point. Will the U.S. secure more security assistance or law enforcement agreements? We're doing that for our own security. That's something that's par for the course with allies and partners, and even other states, neutral states all across the world. We're just trying to get greater guarantees for positioning military or getting other people to take on their own security. And part of what's being used to sweeten the deal there are these trade deals. It tends to get reported in reverse. You'll probably hear about the trade deal more before you hear about the specifics of those security arrangements. But insofar as those get reported, more security assistance and law enforcement agreements, in my mind, is going to lead to a resolution of many trade deals and probably a stabilization of tariffs, as far as I'm looking at. And that brings me to the conclusion. Apologies for rushing through the slides, but I'd love to open the floor to any questions.
Yeah, I'll kick off too. First of all, I appreciate the analogy of geopolitics as reality TV because that often feels like where my perspective on geopolitics is barely even the crest of the wave. So that was a very good comparison there. Um, you mentioned intelligence services tailored for decision makers. What kinds of information is out there? I know you went through a series of things, but what do you mean by decision makers, and how do you help individuals understand and apply this kind of information?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Mike. So first off, I would say any decision makers are like key stakeholders within your company. I would also include business continuity staff. I have a little bit of a bias for that, but if you have that at your company, those folks that are managing your business continuity plans, they're going to have a great idea of where your vulnerabilities and exposure are. And they're going to be there. They should hopefully have assets or tools to be able to monitor for that, or at least that's what companies such as mine can provide. Now, what I tend to do is, sitting down with stakeholders or those business continuity managers, determine their individual intelligence requirements, figure out where their decision points are, where they've got vulnerabilities, and from there, just, from my experience in the public sector and private, I can figure out, well, what's an indicator that something is going to turn in favor or out of favor that's going to trigger a decision point. Uh, One example, I'll give a quick example, but it was the war in Ukraine. This goes back to 2022. There were indicators that the war would start. I had a social media client that was very, very focused on whether or not active hostilities were going to start. What I pointed out to that client was that, well, I asked them, where's your exposure? Do you have people or assets on the ground in Ukraine? And the answer was no. It turned out they did, but at the point they didn't know that they had any. So I said, so it doesn't matter. If you guys don't have artillery, you're moving to the border or people to get out, the war doesn't matter. But the Russians are prepping the battle space with information operations, and they're using your social media platform to do so. So that should be triggering a decision point. Don't wait for the actual active hostilities to start. For your purposes, the war has already started, and that triggered a decision point. If that answers your question, Mike.
No, that's a fantastic perspective. Those decision points are very, very difficult for a lot of businesses to recognize. And one of the reasons that I asked you to speak today is because that forefront role that intelligence plays in possibly creating proactive strategies, as you mentioned, it's often a back and forth on where you put your resources and how you navigate through it. You also mentioned one thing in your response there. A term I used on a previous webinar is succession planning, and having that business continuity is an extremely important asset. I have a couple of other questions I've written down, but I'm going to wait until we get to the end and give our next speaker a chance to speak here. So I'm going to pivot. Thank you, Lee, very much for your insights there, and we'll circle back towards the end of the webinar.
No, thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, sorry. And I want to say welcome to Chris Lundy. Chris is a licensed customs broker and head of customs brokerage and import trade compliance for Röhlig USA. Chris has more than 30 years in trade, and Röhlig is a leader in global logistics with U.S. hubs in Atlanta, Detroit, Houston, LA, and Miami, and offices across most major U.S. networks. Chris is going to talk today about some of the customs broker perspectives from 2025. So take it away, Chris.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to speak with everybody today. As you know, 2025 has been quite a year. If I had a dollar for every time I heard the word tariff, I'd be retired and living on a beach somewhere. But that's not the world that we live in. We're living in a world where we're trying to deal with tariffs. We're trying to navigate what seems impossible to navigate. We're trying to plan when we don't know what's about to happen. We don't know the rules of what's going on right now. This is new for everybody. Pardon me. And we just are dealing with the cards that we have. So next slide, please. This is just an overview, not inclusive, but an overview of the tariffs that we're dealing with right now, either actual or threatened. I have minutes instead of days, so I'll just kind of hit the highlights on these. Most favored nation, back in 2024, that's what we called the duty rate. It almost seems irrelevant right now, and in some cases, like the EU, it is irrelevant when you have the reciprocal, the way that it works with the EU agreement that we have with them. But most favored nation is just the old school standard duty rate. Section 301 is most notably with China. We tend to think of Section 301 as the 25% tariff on China. It's a little bit more than that, but in a general sense, that's what we look at. Section 232 is where you're going to put all of your auto parts, steel, aluminum, copper. There's more being added almost on a daily or weekly basis, but that's the majority of those right now. In 2024, those were basically all that we used. We would have the standard duty rate. If it was coming from China, we would have some extra 301 duties. When you had products that were steel and aluminum, you would add in Section 232. All these others are basically new terms and new tariffs for 2025 that either were not being used and have been reintroduced, or new tariffs. Most, we don't even know what to call some of these. If you follow the president's social media, just last Friday, he said he was going to put a 100% tariff on China. They're calling that the rare earth export control countermeasure. I don't have a better name for it, but that's what they're calling it. We get these threats of tariffs. They may come out to be something, they may not. But we can't completely ignore what's being put out there. If we, as a customs broker, when we hear something such as 100% tariff on additional tariff on goods coming in from China, if we don't pay attention to it, we're putting ourselves in a position where November comes and these tariffs start. And if we didn't take it serious, we're in a position where the president literally told us exactly what he was going to do, and we didn't take it serious. On the flip side, we're living in a world where we're seeing policy by social media, which is just something that I think it causes a lot of anxiety for customs brokers. Customs brokers are very proud. They're very diligent. But we're in a world now where we don't have black and white. There's always been some sort of mechanism in order to get clarity. But we're lacking a lot of that right now. Exclusions. There are certain products that have been excluded from the reciprocal, most notably Annex 2. As a importer, you really need to look into your products to see what your exposure is when you bring these products in. You might have something that's on an exclusion list where it's not going to be hit with the IEEPA tariffs. You might not. You might have additional tariffs that you weren't expecting, and that can really throw your business into a tailspin. You importers out there, I doubt that any of you have a 50% margin that would not hurt if you come in unprepared. So it's very important now, more than ever, to be as knowledgeable and as current as you can possibly be. I do this all day, every day, and I struggle with it. I read notifications from customs. I read some of the guidance, and some of it is so illogical with my background as a customs broker that it just doesn't make sense. And I try and guide my clients. I tell them, I see this black and white just like you do, but it makes me nauseous to say it out loud. One of the examples of what I'm talking about is that on the customs guidance, they had said that if you have reciprocal tariffs, I'm sorry, Section 232 derivative tariffs, and you can break out the amount of steel or aluminum from the cost of the entire good, then you can only pay the punitive tariff on that. But you also, and this was very black and white when you're reading it, it said that you do not have to pay reciprocal on either part. And from a logic point of view, that just didn't make any sense at all. And customs came back after the fact, I think it was a few months in, and said, no, that's not the way that it's going to be handled. They without any sort of acknowledgement, they removed that guidance from their FAQ page. Luckily, we had screenshots. I think a lot of this is going to be challenged in court, but that's a long process, and you can't make any plans on what you think the courts are going to do. Let's see, tariff stacking. That's a new one. There's so many tariffs going on right now that they have put out guidance as far as what is exclusive and what is inclusive when you add on the different tariffs. An analogy of that is one of my team members. I have a licensed broker who does some consulting internally and externally for my team as well as clients and education. And the way that she explained tariff stacking was that if you are walking down the street, you see a hat, you put a hat on. Now, when you get to the next shop and you see a pretty hat, you're not going to put that hat on because you already have a hat. And what I mean by that is tariff stacking. There are rules in which if you are bringing in auto parts, then there's guidance put out there in order to determine what other tariffs are stacked on top of that, or most notably, what is not stacked on that. Typically, if you pay Section 232, you're not going to pay the IEPA, and you're probably not going to pay some of the other odd. The Indian one, I think, is the Russian oil that's associated with India. If you pay the 232, it not always, but often will relieve you from some of the other duties that are stacked on top of that. So that's what that is. Some of these others are pretty rare. I don't think free speech ever came into play. That was threatened. Russian oil is, to me, it's a little bit odd because we're putting that out on one country, but if you look at who all buys oil from China, from Russia, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But it is what it is. This is the world that we live in, and we're just trying to navigate through it. Next slide, please. All right, uncertainty. Change is outpacing adaptability. That is true across the board. Name a sector of what customs brokers or importers are doing, and that will be true. Our systems can't keep up with it. Our software vendors can't keep up with it. Customs can't keep up with it. I don't know about all customs brokers and all the platforms, but when we started with the tariffs early in 2025, we went almost a week where we could not get our system to accept entries as far as the entry summary. I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown until I realized that some of the huge, massive freight forwarders and customs brokers were having the same trouble. And I thought, well, my 2,000 entries that I'm dealing with is nothing compared to their 20,000 entries that they're dealing with. So that gave me a little bit of peace of mind. It didn't curb the anxiety. The liabilities here is just off the charts. We're struggling to keep up. The guidance, the CSMSs, which we take as the holy gospel, those are often coming out a few hours before the tariffs go into place. When the president put out on social media last Friday that we were about to have 100% tariff on China, in addition to everything else, coming in to work Monday morning, the number of emails asking specifics on that was just off the charts. And basically every one I had to say, I don't know. I really don't know. We want to help, but sometimes as a customs broker, the best advice that we can give to our clients is just tell them, I don't know. We really do not know. We really try to avoid giving information that could get a person in trouble. Poor guidance.
Speed you up a little bit if I can, Chris. I'm sorry.
Not a problem. Not a problem. I could spend days on this. So yeah, let me get through here. Changing criteria can be quite costly. The biggest thing I'm thinking about here is the feeder vessels. When they put out with the in-transit provision, it came out saying that if you have cargo that's loaded on a vessel headed towards the United States, I'm paraphrasing, you do not have to pay that. Very far into the game, they came out and said that feeder vessels do not count. I did not see that one coming. In fact, I was on a webinar and they were speaking how feeder vessels do count. And while in real time on that webinar, they said you'd better check your messages because it just came out and said that feeder vessels do not count. And a lot of people have gotten into a lot of trouble because they were not anticipating these additional fees, but they got caught with a feeder vessel. It's hard to plan. It's hard to know what you're going to pay in tariffs next month. It's hard to know what you're paying in tariffs today. Next slide, please. What can you do to make things better? Be wary of ChatGPT. I love ChatGPT. I think it's a great tool, but it's not entirely accurate. It can give you general guidance, but if you type in what is my tariff rate going to be on shovels coming from India, it'll probably give you an answer, and it may or may not be right. CSMSs, that's the holy gospel. That is the guidance that we take. Until we see it there, we don't really act on it with 100% full throttle. I can't believe that I live in a world where I'm saying this as a subject matter expert. Tweets are not the final word in tariffs, but there are resources out there. There's trade groups. If you have an industry that you're a part of as an importer, I highly recommend joining any sort of trade group. They have the resources. You have groups and you have a strength in numbers. You can see how other people in the industry are navigating what you're trying to navigate. There's webinars, newsletters, podcasts. I've seen a bunch of good ones pop up in this chat. I say go look at all of them, see which one works for you. What can you do to help your broker? Your broker is struggling. I've said this 100 times, jesting. In January, my beard was jet black, and now look at me. That's joking, but it's very stressful for brokers. Your brokers are tired. They're trying to navigate this. They don't know every single industry out there with the changes. They're doing the best they can. They're very good. I have numerous people on my team who have 20, 30 years experience. I have not one person who has more than a year experience with all of these tariffs that are going on. This is new for all of us. We're finding this out in real time, just like you are. Section 232 breakdowns. You can try and give your customs broker as much information as you can. Know your product, know what tariffs are associated with it. Give them as much information as you can so that they don't have to ask for it. We as customs brokers, we're really struggling, and we're explaining over and over and over again to an importer why their shampoo bottle that they're importing, or why their shampoo or beer is a big one. Why beer is getting flagged for 50% tariff on Section 232. The truth is, it's a breakdown. If you bring in beer, technically it's subject to 50% tariff on that aluminum. But if you can provide the customs broker with a breakdown, you only have to pay that 50% on that part, which is attributed to the alcohol. I'm sorry, to the aluminum. My apologies, I misspoke. Heightened oversight. You really need to look at your entries. You need to be more in tune with your broker. You need visibility on what your broker's filing. They don't know your product as good as you do. You need to look at these for errors. We're in a world where our safety nets and our system resources are falling behind in a big way. We can't rely on the systems to do the work that we used to. We use a very reputable, it's a industry standard software platform for customs entries, and it is very, very far behind, and they're probably one of the best ones out there. So keep an eye on your customs brokers. Understand that they don't know your product as well as you do, and just educate yourself. Educate your broker about what you expect from their entry, and understand that the liability that these customs brokers have right now is just off the charts, not only in a financial aspect, but in an ethical sense. We are doing the best we can for our clients, and we're just in a world that has been turned upside down. So that is the end of my speech, and thank you very much.
Chris, thank you so much. I'm not going to ask a question yet. I'm going to go through a couple more slides before we get to your questions, but I did notice a lot of people in the chat appreciating the honesty and perspective of the broker and recognition of how difficult it's been for you guys, and the validation that you gave to everybody. So thank you for that. I am going to skim through these, and then we'll get to the last slide and open up for questions. Some of the recent and upcoming events. De minimis ended on August 29th. 2 weeks ago, the BIS 50% rule came out, similar to the OFAC 50% rule. On October 1st, the U.S. government shut down. On October 3rd, the Section 301 on Chinese ocean vessels started to take effect, and then the reciprocity on U.S. vessels going to China from there. November 1st, we have the threat of 100% tariffs on Chinese imports in relation to what Chris was talking about a moment ago. And on November 5th, we have the Supreme Court oral arguments on the IEEPA tariffs in the Trump v. Voss and the Learning Resources versus Trump cases. I will say real quick, I was at a conference in DC last week, and they polled the audience for what they thought the outcome of that IEEPA case was. And about 10% thought that the Supreme Court would uphold the lower court's decisions, and about 90% thought that the Supreme Court would either side with Trump or at least not issue refunds on the existing IEEPA tariffs. Next month, we will be discussing some tariff mitigation strategies and any industry developments we've seen from there. I want to plug an event that we have going on. I talked about networking earlier. On November 14th, next month, it's about a month. It is literally a month from today. On Friday, November 14th, There's going to be an Elevate Women's Summit in Northeast Ohio, in Middlebrook Heights, Cleveland, Ohio. Uh, Please check out our website if you're interested in attending that event. It is for women in international trade to start to build their network. The tickets are relatively inexpensive, and you get a professional headshot and access to the sessions and networking opportunities and food and a drink ticket and swag bags and more. So I highly encourage you all to check this out. It is available on our website. You can find it. It's the Elevate Summit if you need to search for it. And then I'll put this slide up and we'll do some Q&A if we've got in the last 4 minutes here. We do have a question from the audience, from Sandra asking, any real updates on the court cases or any direction for U.S. imports to start PSC process for the IEEPA tariff duty refunds? I'll take this one first, and then Chris or Lee, if you want to weigh in on the Supreme Court standings, I'd be welcome to have you guys jump in. From my understanding, the Supreme Court has provided no additional insight. The court case is ongoing. They have received amicus briefs earlier this month or currently this week, maybe. In terms of the PSC process or any of that stuff, personally, I'm not holding my breath. I'm not going to begin the PSC process in earnest until the Supreme Court issues a decision. Perhaps suspension of liquidation, but we'll go from there. Chris, did you have anything to say about the Supreme Court case?
Yes, as importers and customs brokers too, you need to keep an eye on the liquidation dates of these entries. If you're having entries that liquidate, you only have 180 days in which to file a protest, and this is going to extend. This court case is going to extend past your eligibility dates for any sort of recourse. What we did during the first Trump presidency was we would file protests. And what we would say is this is a placeholder. After the court case or whatever uncertainty there was out there, we would say these will be either amended with specifics or they'll be withdrawn depending on how the outcome is of whatever is out there. But as importers, you need to help your broker with these dates and entries. As brokers, you need to try and run as many queries. You need to try and keep an eye on that because this is a massive liability. And if this goes on very long, you're losing the ability to, if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the importers, then you only have a limited amount of time. And some of these might even be getting close to the end of that time. So.
Lee, did you want to jump in on Supreme Court case for the tariffs?
No, I don't have anything to add for that one.
We have another question here in the chat. And Lee, I think this one's going to be more up your alley because it's not mine. But feel free to jump in, Chris, if you have insight. The question is from Anonymous. From an economic cooperation perspective, how could expanding the Abraham Accords to include more Middle Eastern states create a more stable investment environment and reduce regional volatility?
That's a great question. So, off the top of my head, expanding the Abraham Accords. So, the bulk of the Abraham Accords have been about normalizing relations between primarily the Arab states and Israel. With that is going to come potentially investment between those countries. Now, with investment, when we say it brings stabilization, countries are less likely to A, go to war, or B, it kind of minimizes some of that competition, right? Or it mitigates some of the tensions between countries. So that's the kind of stabilization we're looking for. I would point to China as an example, right? They are, as per our national security strategy, an adversary of the United States. We do compete with them in many arenas, and obviously, yes, there's a lot of tariffs involved with them, but we still conduct a lot of trade with them as well. And that you know, just like nuclear weapons deter war, trade can also deter, competition from going out of control. So that's the best answer I've got for now.
Fantastic answer. And we're kind of at time here at 11 o'clock, so I want to wrap it up. But I want to say just a very special thank you to Lee and to Chris for taking time to provide your perspectives. I think it was very, very impactful for the audience today.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
And to everyone oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was just saying, thanks for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure, genuinely. For everyone in the audience, thank you for sticking around. If you do have additional questions that you would like us to field, I believe contact info was shared in the chat, or you can send emails to us, train@starusa.org, and we'll get them over to Lee and or Chris as needed. There were a lot of great links shared in the chat today. Thank you to everyone that participated. Having a network is very, very important. Best of luck to everyone in the remaining months. And yes, we will be talking about this stuff in next month's webinar and in December as well, and probably beyond that as well. Thank you all.
Sounds good. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
Stop button there.